Welcome to the Northland Bassin Podcast with fishing guide John Myrie and bass tournament angler Ken Melander. On the Northland Bassin Podcast, we cover everything bass fishing for both largemouth and smallmouth here in the Wisconsin Northland and all across the northern tier of Midwest states. Hello, folks. I'm John Myrie, and sitting here with co-host Ken Melander. We're doing this is episode 10 of Northland Bassin Podcast, and good to be here again, Ken.
Yeah, the summer's going by way too fast, and within a few weeks, the leaves will start to fall.
Well, you mentioned that, and as we're sitting here recording this, it just went from hot summer to pre-fall, or almost the fall, but the water temperatures dropped like crazy.
Yeah, it's like 40 degrees the last 2 mornings. It's like kind of get you in the grouse hunting mood.
Well, speaking of, we're not going to talk about hunting season, but they're fast coming up here too. But, a lot of things change on the fish out there when it comes to fall. And fall is a great time to get out there after just about any kind of fish, including the bass. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the smallmouth bass because that's a big draw for people. A lot of people come up here to fish the smallmouth, and let's face it, there's nothing more fun than fishing and catching smallmouth, I don't think.
Yeah, well, right now, coming up in the next few weeks, it's going to go from smallmouth live scoping to topwater bite. And, as long as the main lake minnows start making contact of any type of structure, regardless of the depth, topwater can become really good. And then as the season progresses until the water gets, in the upper 50s, after turnover, those fish can be caught shallow.
A lot of guys wouldn't think about topwater as we start getting into the fall stuff, but those fish will actually be up in the weeds and they'll be shallower. And even if they're just outside the weeds, for some reason, they go after topwater. And I didn't notice today. I mean, we're recording this right at the end of August here, and I went out to my truck this morning, and there was a couple of dragonflies sitting on it. I mean, we had bug hatch already this late for dragonflies, it seems like.
I've had days where smallies will come from 20 feet of water. You never know. It's just a bait you got to have in the boat and try it, because smallmouth can have certain personalities on certain types of day and cloud cover. When them minnows start getting scattered around structure, I mean, they will pack and start chasing. You never know where you're going to find them.
What kind of places do you recommend people try to look out there? Just often the weed flats or
steeper breaks that have big flats on them. Because smallies will like to roam them flats. Because the perch, they get a lot of perch and crawdads, coming this time of year. So there'll be a lot of the 2-3 inch perch will be on them flats too. But it can't be just pure sand. It has to have some sort of weed or clams in the soil. Something that creates a little bit stronger ecosystem as far as life in the food chain. If it's just all pure sand, it's not near as good. And if you have some hard pea gravel areas or even some small rock ridges, can be a bonus.
A lot of people think automatically that they don't think of minnows when it comes to smallmouth because they know they eat a lot of crayfish and they do take bugs off the top of the water, but they really heavily forage on minnows at times, perch, and then you get later in the year, I mean, sucker minnows, anything, they eat bugs and fish.
Well, everyone talks about the mayfly hatch. You might as well just stay home and go golfing or watch TV. That's true. Every species will take an opportunity on huge insect hatches, because it's so easy. It's like us, it's like some days we want ice cream, but then when it's really hot out, we eat ice cream every day. Because it's so keeps you cool and it's refreshing, and insects are the same way to all the fish.
Well, you're looking for the more active fish when you're topwater fishing, and when you get up on them weed flats, if you've got some active fish up there, spinnerbaits also work pretty good, right?
Yeah, once the leaves hit the water, spinnerbaits can be really good on the flats.
Yeah, and you just a straight retrieve, or are you kind of letting it flutter down some, or?
Pretty much straight retrieve, relatively fast. Sometimes you just want to ripple the blades on the surface to create a little small wake.
Yeah, you're looking for the active biters there, and a lot of people think that you got to go to the finesse stuff right away, and you don't. I mean, look for the active fish first. I mean, you've got active fish out there, and there's always going to be a few of them out there, unless you get a real turn off from a major cold front or something. But tend to look for the active fish first. Some of the best tournament bass fishermen in the country over the years have been power fishermen. They're going after the active biters first.
Well, Kevin Van Dam, he set records on the Bassmasters Tour and a couple other tours just by using reaction baits. I mean, he just covered water.
Yep. You're just looking mostly for a reaction that comes zipping past them there. But when things come right down to it and things shut down and slow down, that's when it gets to be, I mean, like one of my guide friends of mine up in Ashland said, it's boring, actually. You got to slow way down to just let it sit in front of them sometimes. And that's things like drop shot rigs and wacky rigs or worms rigged and also, things like your Ned rigs now.
Yeah, it seems to be barometric pressure and weather front conditions that really like open up their strike zone. And some days, you'd think it'd be great for fishing, and it's just not. And so dead sticking is a really good technique.
Well, if it's any kind of fish you're after, I mean, if you have unstable weather patterns, a lot of this stuff doesn't work. But if you have stable weather patterns, really, you should start looking at them majors and minors and the moonrise, moonset, all that stuff, because it all comes into play when you have real stable weather and for fish, and that's any predatory fish, it seems like.
Yeah, so it'd be like, boy, can you sleep really good with really light blankets on you, or can you sleep really good with, like 5 pounds per square inch? That's what the barometric pressure does in the water. It creates density and it creates pressure within the fish's body, and then his air bladder has to kind of expand to acclimate to the pressure of the water. So it's like moon phases can affect the depth on oceans to create currents that, like in Alaska, the tides can be 27 feet.
If we're talking active fish versus inactive fish, and I've been a firm believer for a long time is that the time frame that you're looking at these fish that are hot active. I mean, fish that you throw a bait out there, whether it's a muskie or it's a smallmouth bass, you throw a bait out there and it comes zipping in from 15, 20 feet away to eat it. Those times, I think, are a relatively short period of time compared to the rest of the time when the fish are a lot less active, and then you better rely on either getting close to the fish, right on top of the fish, or you got to have something that comes zipping by them that triggers a responsive bite.
Yeah, I think another variable that's really important is the depth of the thermocline and the surface temp of a lake. Because you take a fish that's in 50 degrees of water, he's not going to come 20 feet to 75 degree water. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, they just don't come zipping in that quick a lot of times. I mean, you got to get really close. And one of the guys that we're going to have on here, Larry Dahlberg, coming up here during the podcast, the interview, we're talking to Larry. He put it within a cube of 6 inches in front of the fish's face. A lot of times it's got to be there.
Yeah, same thing with largemouth. Sometimes their strike zone, they won't turn their body much just to suck in, a quart of water, which, a 5-pound bass can probably suck in over a quart of water, to take the whole bait, right into its mouth. And so I've had a lot of success just dead sticking jig worms at the bottom of a cabbage point, and you just let it sit there for 2 or 3 minutes. Pretty soon, boom, there it goes.
A jig worm, that's an old Minnesota guide trick. They've been using those for years over there. Just a mushroom head jig with a curly tail worm on it.
Yeah, I remember the first ones that I had a lot of confidence on having a really stiff hook was Connie Peterson's.
Yeah, there's lots of things there. Well, we should talk a little bit about one of our sponsors here, a couple of our sponsors. We're here in the Hayward, Wisconsin area. We're blessed with a lot of different water here, including the second largest inland lake in the state of Wisconsin, the Chippewa Flowage, which is an amazing body of water. It's got a couple hundred islands on it, about 16,000, 17,000 acres of water out there, and like 200 miles of shoreline. It's ridiculous how complex the lake is. You go from clear water to dark water, but we've got all kinds of other lakes, and we've got some really trophy smallmouth bass lakes too. We've got Grindstone, Coudray, Round, Just north, you got Lake Owen. We got a bunch of waters around here that got smallmouth bass in them, and a ton of largemouth waters.
There's some secret lakes that, smallmouth is really good fishing, and you can always go to Ashland and just pound them too.
Yeah. And you come into the Hayward area here, you've got the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame here in Hayward. You've got, I don't know how many miles, hundreds of miles of snowmobile trails, hiking trails, just trails, lots of trails, and you've got just so much to do in the Hayward area here. It's amazing, and a lot of big events that go on here too.
Nationwide, kayak fishing is getting pretty popular. It's no different here in Hayward. You have the Chippewa River, the Namakogan, the Flambeau. All of them are excellent fisheries for smallmouth. I mean, it's unbelievable. You could have 100 fish days.
Well, if you're talking kayak fishing too, the Chippewa Flowage is an amazing body of water to kayak on because you got so many backwater bays and places you can go. I actually filmed a TV show out here one time years ago with the Hobie kayak. We just ran a bunch of back channels and we caught fish. We just stayed out of the wind almost all of the time in the waves.
Yep, and it's very scenic too.
Yeah, you bet. Well, a lot of interesting things there in Hayward here to see. If you're looking for more information on lodging or vacationing here in the Hayward Lakes area, a couple of places, the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau, their website is haywardlakes.com. And we've also got the Hayward Area Chamber of Commerce, that's haywardareachamber.com. And a lot of information there, a good place, source of information. And, we're still talking about who we got coming up for a guest on here. None other than Mr. Larry Dahlberg.
Yeah, I've been following him with the In-Fisherman staff I've learned so much from that gentleman through the years. And, then when he started his goddamn big fish show and you see him all over the world, I was a little jealous. And the different cultures that he had to experience in all these different countries going after the biggest fish in the area that the locals needed for survival, or we just primarily catch and release a lot of the big fish. But it would have been really interesting to be his camera boat guy.
Well, it wasn't all easy either, because I've talked to Larry about that, and there's the problems with the safe drinking water and bug hatches and different poisonous critters. And I mean, everywhere he went, they were in some pretty remote areas and places that were not exactly what you call human friendly, I don't think.
Yeah, two things I don't like so much in foreign countries is spiders and snake.
Anyway, let's hear that talk we had with Larry, and we'll be back with more on bass fishing for you. We're talking to pro angler Larry Dahlberg. And Larry, great to have you on the podcast here to start with here.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Well, we're talking bass fishing here, and I know you've been doing a lot of bass fishing, but you do a lot of muskie fishing too. And it seems like that, and most of the people I know that are our age that are either pro anglers or pro guides, the two favorite fish seem to be either smallmouth bass or muskie. It depends on which are the biggest ones or where the most abundance of them it is.
Well, there's a lot of different fish, and for the ones we've got locally, those two species are hard to beat. I wish we had tarpon here.
Well, tarpon's a whole nother animal. We to get into that topic. I mean, I wish that they start using some of the rules for muskies that they use for tarpon as far as not bringing the bigger fish in the boat. But that's a different topic we could talk about.
That's for sure.
Let's talk about bass. I mean, you were fishing for bass when you were just a little guy, I guess, weren't you?
Well, I started guiding for them when I was 11.
11? Yeah.
Yeah.
You've done. It wasn't all fly fishing either. You did just about everything, right?
Well, I fished for everything, but the people that would pay me to row them down and point out where to throw it were the fly guys. So my dad only let me guide fly fishermen because he felt they were sort of harmless. But I fish bass with everything there is to fish them with, live bait, artificial bait, soft plastics, whatever,
Well, yeah, I think I remember someplace reading where you actually used to, before we had depth finders and all this stuff, you used to climb up in trees to be able to watch the fish in them rivers, see what they did to learn something about the fish.
My dad used to drive. You'd get arrested if you did this today. he would drop me in below a power dam when I was 9 years old with a Grumman sport boat, weighs 114 pounds. And he would let me just go and then pick me up 3 days later. But in the first stop, I would catch crayfish, and then I'd climb up into the trees that were overhanging and just drop them in and see what happened. It was before Polaroids were invented.
Well, and you back then you mostly concentrated on the muskies or the smallmouth bass. Which one?
Well, my dad had picked me up 3 days later and say, "Hey, did you see any muskies?" But I just like them both. And then as I got older, I got really hooked on the muskie stuff, and then I got curious about all the other creatures in the world, and mostly it's the environments that I find interesting.
Well, you fished a lot of different environments. You had that Hunt for Big Fish TV show was pretty popular, and you got all over the world, right?
It took me to 89 countries.
Wow. In what is there just a whole lot of different kinds of fish outside? We think about what we got here, but there's just a ton of other species of fish out there that people go after with a fishing rod, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the things that are successful for one species that, you maybe never heard of could be very successful for our fish back home. It's really interesting how it transposes. But, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz at the end where Dorothy's clicking her heels together. And she says, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home."
Is that true? It's just we seem to have all these places to go fishing, but we've got our favorite places we always want to go back to.
Well, it's where your roots are.
Yeah. You've developed a lot of different things when it comes to the fishing industry, too. I mean, a lot of people don't know that, but I think Flashaboo, and there was just a lot of other things that you kind of were involved with, too, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty long list. The one that's probably most important, I never got any credit for, was the blank through offset handle that we have on all the bass rods and stuff now.
Oh, yeah?
And yeah, I had patented that, but we didn't have enough money to defend the patent. It was about 30, 40 years ago. The first year, there was $85 million worth of infringing product. We've got a letter somewhere that says, well, this is very important. We all need it. If we ignore these guys, they don't have enough money to defend it. So away we go. Well, yeah, that and Whopper Plopper, Dahlberg Diver, the drift paddle that you put on your power poles to slow your boat down. I actually invented that too.
Wow.
Yeah, a bunch of different stuff, but none of it was ever for a purpose of doing anything other than trying to catch another fish. I was never trying to invent something to, create a product. It just ended up that way.
Well, and I know a lot of guides that do the same thing, and we always got to try to make something better. We're always out there trying to modify something or make something better or trying to do something different, because sometimes it makes a big difference in how many fish you catch.
Makes a huge difference, especially heavily pressured fish, man.
Oh, talking about pressured fish. I mean, these fish nowadays are getting they're getting hit from every angle there is, and anybody that says these fish are dumb as a rock, I mean, they get conditioned pretty quick, I think.
They get conditioned depending on the species and the situation, but I think they have really good memories, and it's more like a plus minus thing. But they have enough. You get enough negative input, and they remember, and they avoid boats. They'll avoid sonar. They'll avoid, things that should be avoided.
What can you give a recommendation to people that try to combat some of that? When you get into a lake that gets really fished hard, if you're after bass, for instance, smallmouth bass, and the lake gets fished really hard, what would be your go-to approach to try to, be successful out there?
Oh man, there's just so many different angles. It depends on so much on the environment. It depends on the weather. It depends on why they're tough. That's a question that at the end of the day, you've got fish that either eat each other or they eat bugs. Okay. And when you're talking about a fish like a smallmouth, or any fish that's shaped like that has teeth like that. Most of them are bug eaters. And if you put something that is non-threatening and has the same pretty much specific gravity as water, like an insect in the water, if you think about what they look like when they're hatching a mayfly, like a big hexagenia, if something like that gets into a cube of space on a smallmouth, it's about 6 inches square, into a cube of space in front of their face, God taps them on the shoulder, says, "Pal, take a deep breath. This is a free meal." And they go, and they suck it up. And so if you had one thing you had to do, if you could see that fish, you put something that is bug-like and non-threatening in front of that little cube of space, and you will see his gills flare. And then you'll see him flare again when he spits it out. But it's almost an automatic response.
Well, that's, what you said, that space, that strike window, that can be very, very short. I mean, when they're really aggressive and they're active, they'll travel a long ways to hit something or eat something. But when they're not aggressive, which is most of the time, you got to get closer to that fish.
It has to be often in a very close place. People don't know this, but fish sleep most of the time. You and I have got a little deal in our brain called a suprachiasmatic nuclei. And when I wake you up, you're sort of, "Oh, where am I?" for a minute, and then you are conscious. If you wake up to the smell of bacon frying, you might be drooling when I wake you up. If it's a sound of a fire alarm and smoke, you might be halfway out the window before you're fully awake. A fish can be asleep and then awake in a millisecond because they do not have a suprachiasmatic nuclei. And so they can be dead asleep and dead awake in a millisecond. And so whatever it is that wakes them up, if it's perceived as a threat, they're taking off. If it's perceived as food, then maybe the other way. Sometimes it takes bottom contact. There's all sorts of different triggers you can read about, the stuff that Doug Hannon wrote, the stuff that Buck Perry wrote. It's all very, very valid.
Doug Hannon was very interesting, the stuff that he wrote about. He was very conscious on everything from his clothing he wore to the color of the bottom of his boat to the noise. I mean, these fish know what's going on around them.
They live in an environment that's wired for sound.
Yeah.
Plus, they don't have to go home. They're already home. You and I we got to go home eventually. That's our biggest disadvantage.
A lot of people don't realize how much sound travels. I had one of the pro guides just recently on the radio show talking about they were walleye fishing, doing a TV thing up in Canada, and they dropped a GoPro down 26 feet to see what the walleyes were doing. And when they got back and watched the video, they could hear themselves talking in the boat 26 feet above them.
Big surprise. Ha ha. Back in the early 70s, I worked for Berger Brothers Sporting Goods, and I was real interested in sound. And so I rigged up an underwater microphone and an oscilloscope because a lot of the sound, we can't hear it. The fish can hear it. We've got a narrow range. And I did it in a swimming pool, and I got no valid information because sound travels like 5 times faster underwater, and in a swimming pool, it's perfectly symmetrical, so all the echoes were crazy. Then I took it out into the real environment. The bottom content makes a huge difference as to how far sound travels. With the microphones I've got, I could be a half a mile away from a boat landing and hear a 10-horse motor idling at the launch underwater. It's incredible.
Yeah, actually, when I was just out of high school, I went in the Navy, and I was a sonar tech, so we dealt with that sound underwater.
There you go.
Yeah, and it's something that people should be aware of. I mean, when you approach a spot, I try to tell people, try to be as stealthy as you can instead of just roaring into a spot and making a bunch of noise. And, you want to catch fish, you got to, think about what you're doing out there, I think.
Either that or you just have to be just insanely lucky.
You developed earlier. I touched on you developed some things, but the one thing I always remember you for was the Dahlberg diver fly, and that would actually. How did that come about? I mean,
Well, I had this great big bass I was trying to catch on a fly, and I couldn't get him to. I could get him to follow, but I couldn't get him to bite. Is a largemouth actually, and my dad had just run into a guy that we started fishing muskies with. It was a buddy of a fellow named Frank Suick. And this guy's name was Keck. And he brought these Suick lures with him. And I was watching how they'd go down, and then as they came up, instead of going backwards, they swam forwards. And I was trying to build something that would work more like a Suick that I could cast with a fly rod. So I played with a lot of different shapes. And I came up with that diver shape. And I remember testing it at the end of my dock. Yep. And then I jumped in the boat, and whenever I caught this bass, it weighed 6 pounds, 7 ounces. And I went to work that day, and I was guiding the president of the 3M company. And his buddy had just caught an honor roll smallmouth. That was a 3.5 pounder or bigger on a fly I'd given him that had a Flashaboo on it. And this guy's name was Bert Cross. He was kind of grumpy because, so I pulled him up to this spot that I was sure was going to be great. And he made a bunch of casts, nothing. So I took out this fly that I caught the bass on that morning. It still smelled like largemouth. He says, "What the hell is this thing?" I put it on. And he threw it out, and the fly line caught the current, and the fly goes up like this, and pow, a bass hits it. And he jerked, and he had a 10-weight fly rod, and poing, the fly comes flying back. It had a real light Aberdeen hook on it. And it lands out in the middle of the river, and he spins around in his chair and gives it a strip, and it goes up, and another one hit it, and he hooked it. And he turned and he says, "Larry, I think you got something here." And that was the first day I ever used it. And
yeah,
got a lot of fish on it since then.
You've had an incredible career when it comes to fishing, and there's a lot of people out there in the fishing industry. Not many have done what you've done. I mean, you were actually doing a lot of the production work for the In Fisherman TV shows for years, right?
Yeah, I was in charge of the production of that show for a long time. They hired me to just do the fly pieces, and then I only fly fished maybe 5% of the time growing up.
Well, I know that.
I just looked at them all as tools. It's all tools.
Yeah, well, that's what you have to. There's a different tool for different applications. I know the first time that I met you was when actually the whole In Fisherman crew, Al and Ron and everybody came up to Hayward every spring to go fishing, and you and I took off and went back into Muskie Bay, and you were throwing a fly you were trying to catch a pike or a muskie on a fly back beside of Muskie Bay.
I don't even remember that. It was so long ago.
Yeah, well,
that'd be a half a century.
Yeah, it probably was close to half a century ago. But anyway, yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff, and I'd like to get you on here from time to time if I can. We talk about fishing and bass fishing, and there's nothing better to do out there than just get out in the lake, and it's not always about how many fish you can catch. It's about how just enjoying the time you spend out there, because we only have so much time.
That's all we got. You're born and you've got time, but you don't know how much. You don't want to waste it.
Well, Larry, I want to thank you greatly for taking the time here. It's been interesting talking to you.
Well, and to you too. Good to catch up with you.
Well, thanks a lot.
You have a great day. See ya.
Well, Ken, it was interesting talking to Larry, and I get a chance to see him once in a while. It's just like a lot of the people from over the years I know, but Al Linder and those guys, I just don't see a lot of those guys anymore. I'm getting older. They're getting older. We don't run the sports shows like we used to and stuff, and we just don't run into the guys. And had a chance to talk to Larry. I got his phone number. I got a chance to talk to him. He's happy to be on the podcast anytime we want to call him. And, I'm just grateful to have him talk to us here. And it's a lot of good information. The guy is just a wealth of fishing knowledge and lure knowledge, and you can't believe all the stuff that he's designed and invented over the years.
Yeah, the lifestyle he lived, starting when he was just a knee-height of grasshopper getting dropped off on a river and get picked up a few days later. You know, it's like, it sounds like Mark Twain.
Yeah, yeah. You know that the best anglers out there, a lot of the pro anglers, there are people that don't fit in this description too, but a lot of them, the fishing has been their lifestyle, and that's from guides to pro anglers. The fishing has been their lifestyle. That's what they do. They don't go golfing. They don't pay attention to a lot of other stuff. I mean, like me, I don't pay attention to any sports or ball games or anything. It's fishing and hunting. It always has been all my life, you know, and that's what we do. And you know, when you're that devoted to what you do, guys get good at stuff. And Larry has been one of these people that just unbelievable fisherman.
Well, every really good angler that, you know, I've met or talked to is being a creative thinker. So being on the water, being a creative thinker, you build the confidence and you just strive to try something new and something different. And that's what creates the addiction and pleasure. Now you have electronics where back in the day we used to keep tablets and we'd line up this tree and be this far away from the shore and use range finders, you know, back when they first came out, so you know how many yards you were out, because it's hard to water and land is deceptive, you know, just like being in the mountains of Montana. You'd think you could walk there in 4 hours, where it's next morning you get there.
Well, all this stuff has changed completely, the way people learn how to fish and stuff. It's unbelievable. And there's people out there that are complaining about stuff like forward-facing sonar and that stuff. But, you know, virtually every pro angler I've talked to, from Lindner's to Spence Pedros, and it's the mapping. The mapping, without that mapping, we came out with them high-resolution 1-foot contour mapping that's available. None of the electronics and stuff makes that much difference. I mean, you got to know where to start looking. I mean, you know, people that say, oh, man, they're going to go out there and they're going to pick out these fish real quick with some of this sonar, especially forward-facing sonar. And if you're good at it, when good with it, yes, it will increase your catch rate. And there's no question about that on some stuff. But you got to know where to start looking for fish to start with. And if you have that mapping, it's not hard to sit at your kitchen table and look at I got the stuff on my phone when that 101 Boat Network app. And you got Navionics stuff on your phone. It's not hard to sit there in your house and pick out all the best-looking inside corners and points and rock bars and this stuff and drop waypoints on them and then go back and check them out once you go out there on the lake. But then you rely on your sonar once you find the spots.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like technology has advanced further than I personally would like it. You know, it's like the younger generation, you know, I refer to them as tech talkers. You know, it's like a small amount of time with the most reward, even though some of the rewards can be pretty negative and they call it bullying. Well, all I have to do is push the off button. You know, our generation of angling, we had to pay our dues. We had to study the ecosystems. We had to print maps. We had to pay to have them blown up. And now that is readily available on your phone. So without that, if we had to go old school, I don't think we'd sell as many fishing licenses, because the younger generation, they need that advanced technology to be entertained. That's just my opinion, and I'll stick with it.
Oh, yeah, I believe that, too.
And
that's just their thing.
Then you have, you know, like TikTok is a prime example of quick rewards and short amount of time for pleasure in your mind. Well, yeah. You have to convert that into setting some sort of goals and understanding the ecosystem of water bodies, so you can transfer some thought processes to create theories in your own mind to build confidence. And that's what separates the best anglers from the ones that just want to think they can push a button and go fishing.
Oh, yeah, because if you go out there and you're relying 100% on, say, your forward-facing sonar, and the conditions you're up against are not conducive to seeing a lot of fish on that, they're deep in the weeds or something, and you don't know how to go about countering that with your tactics or your presentations, you're going to be losing. I mean, it's just that simple. You have to be very diverse. I mean, when everything goes your way and you can use all that technology in your favor, that's great. You can see the fish, you can catch fish, but it's not always that way.
And then you take the older generation that having problems with understanding electronics. I mean, just the other day I had someone come in the parking lot and go, Ken, my Garmin's are all messed up. I can't see my GPS waypoints. They're not networking. You know, my buddy was in my boat. Can you help me out? So there is the complexity of operating the electronics, and a lot of people with live scope still don't have it. Some of them have bought it, put it on their boat, now they don't use it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, one thing I will tell people out there is if you think you messed everything up too much on your unit, and I don't care whether it's a Garmin, Lowrance, or a Humminbird, there's a factory reset in there that and you don't lose your waypoints. You just goes back to what the factory settings were. And that's a good choice to back up and start over again.
Well, you can set everything at auto too, but auto's just going to give you the generic version of what you could really see.
Oh, yeah. You've learned to fine-tune that electronics. You can really, really get good with it. Well, Ken, as we're wrapping up here, I think the next podcast we're going to bring out will be number 11. This one's 10. We're going to be talking, I think, about cold water, deep water, or fall fishing for largemouth and smallmouth. And, you talk about catching smallmouth on top waters, but once we get into late September and October, everything changes.
Yes, it does. And that can be, when people are out there duck hunting, you should be out there fishing. That's some of the best fishing of the year. That's better than the spring.
Oh, yeah, unbelievable. I mean,
that's when you can catch the big ones without the eggs.
Yeah, that's when I tell people that if I got 3 guys in the boat plus me, everybody's going to catch a 19 or 20-inch smallmouth for sure.
Yeah, you can catch some big ones.
Well, Ken, we'll wrap up the podcast here. Thank you for taking the time coming out here to my place and sitting down in my office, and we're recording these things. And for people out there that if you have any questions or any comments, there's a place on Podbean, and the address for the podcast is northlandbassin.podbean.com. And if you go to that, it's available on Spotify too, but if you go to the northlandbassin.podbean.com, there's a place to enter comments and questions or whatever. We'll answer that. If you like our podcast, please subscribe to them and follow what we do out there. And don't forget, if you're looking for information from the Hayward Lakes area here, you can go to haywardlakes.com for the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau, or for the Hayward Area Chamber, it's haywardareachamber.com. A lot of great information, and we've got some good lakes up here to fish, and, I don't know what more I can say about anything.
John, we discussed about putting together this podcast, and I really appreciate your knowledge that you brought to the fishing industry. You've been at this radio gig for a long time.
35 years.
Yeah, long time, and you should be recognized for that. And, I'm no spring chicken either, so I can bring some old school angling. Yeah. It's all we do is just get together and dock talk.
Yep, you grew up in fishing country.
Yeah, there's no notes or nothing here. So
no, we're just flying by the seat of our pants here. So
we try to bring a few pointers to the listening audience and stuff, and so if there anyone out there that wants some specifics, please drop us a line on Podbean and we'll get something together.
Well, thanks a lot, Ken, and thank you folks out there for listening. We'll be back again here in a couple, 2-3 weeks for another podcast talking about the later fall fishing for bass, especially the smallmouth. So we'll see you back here in another podcast.
Well, good luck fishing.
Well, folks, that about wraps up this edition of the Northland Bassin Podcast. If you'd like more information on the Hayward, Wisconsin area, check out the Wisconsin Northland Outdoors Radio Show on our other podcast channel, wnoradio.podbean.com. Or for even more information, on the web at haywardlakes.com or haywardareachamber.com. Thanks for listening, and watch for our next Northland Bassin Podcast. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please like and subscribe to the channel.